Adam.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is a morning somewhere! For October 24th, 2024. My name is Bernie Burns, sitting right over there. She is my favorite hologram lady of all time, Ashley Burns. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm a real girl.
Man, I went back and was watching it. Is Finn in here? No, it's me. I went back and looked at that, the hologram lady, and it's funny because when I looked it up on YouTube, it was literally like every video was called the hologram lady at London Heathrow. I feel like our hologram lady technology should be advanced at this point.
Well, you don't think the like clear plastic silhouette cutout with some kind of like this poor lady desperately not moving while she recites her lines in this recording? You don't think that's not the future technology?
I never thought about that part.
Of holograms?
Yeah, she had to hold in the silhouette of it.
She has to like stay in shape and no moving, no turning the head, just the mouth. Oh. You can move the mouth and that is it.
And it's like the projector that projects on that thing. You just wonder who's working on that. Like who does anyone maintain this, or are we just waiting for it to die?
There's one in the world. Actually, you know what? I think there's there might be another hologram lady in the Athens airport or something like that. So there are two. They're multiplying, Bernie. They're coming for us.
Oh my God, they could all just hop on a plane and meet each other. They can find their people, all the hologram people. Anyway, we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. We've kind of built up a backlog of things we want to talk about. I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible. One of the things I want to talk about was on my recent visit to the U.S. is like, it kind of coincides with both the UK and the US announcing their tax brackets, and taxes are one of these things.
And that is not, that's not like a March Madness bracket. That's not, they're not fighting it out.
It's the top
it sounds way more exciting than it is.
The final four of tax brackets. It's 32% versus 22%. No, but we talk about tax brackets, and to keep this simple, we're just going to talk about, this is just income tax. We're not going to get into like property tax or sales tax or anything like that. That being said, the sales tax in the UK, when we moved here, Ashley, people were always asking, like, how are you going to go there? It's like, isn't it way higher taxes and everything? We'll talk about that when we talk about the income taxes here in a second. But there is a thing here in the UK called VAT, which is value-added tax, which is essentially like sales tax in the US. Sales tax, to make it super confusing, sales tax in the US, it is different in every state, and really different in even some counties and things like that. But in Texas, it's about 8.25%, which you pay on sales tax when you go to buy goods at the cash register. In the UK, VAT is 20%. It's a really big tax compared to sales tax in the US. And it's kind of hidden. People like the fact that in the UK, the prices on the shelf include the tax, but then you don't really know how much you're paying in tax. Kind of hides it from you. That being said, Ashley, when I went back to the US, I had sticker shock across the board because, first of all, I hadn't been back in a long time, so I saw all the inflation all at once.
Oh, all right. You just got slapped right in the face with it. Everyone else had the, like a year or two to sort of get the creep, adjust to the creep.
I was the frog who was not in the pot while it was boiling, basically,
You
right?
just got dropped in and went, oh, shit, that's hot.
Teddy and I went out for breakfast. We went to a place we love to eat in Austin called Kirby Lane Cafe. It's a small little cafe. I had breakfast tacos. He had chili mac and cheese. We did have a little bowl of queso, but we didn't have any like alcoholic drinks. I had coffee. He had a Coke. That was it. It was $54 for us to have breakfast together.
Okay, is that
$54?
Question, is that before or after tipping?
So that's the thing. So that's another hidden cost in the US. Now, in addition, there's like service charges sometimes. I should go look at the bill and see if Kirby charged me a service charge. But actually, everywhere I went in the US, and I had forgotten about this, everywhere I went, it was a tipping screen on every single thing. And what do you think are like the different categories for tipping that you can pay? The three options.
Right, the little boxes. Okay, I'm going to say
tipping brackets.
My final four are 18%. I'm going to say 20%, and I'm going to say 25%.
You nailed it. It was 18%, 21%, and 25% were the things I saw across the board. Do you remember tipping being a baseline of 18%?
Well, when I started, my first job, I was a dessert girl at a restaurant. And I want to say at that time.
Were you? Can you prove that? No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
At that time, I want to say tipping was 15%, but then it was not all that long after that where I feel like the standard for tipping went up to 18%. And now I feel like everyone really expects the 20. And I will say this, I'm lazy, and 20 is a lot easier to do a percentage of than 18.
So then effectively, you're paying 28% with sales tax as well after the cost of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, there's different taxes for different types of goods. I get that. But it is a tax, right? It is a cultural tax that the U.S. has that they don't really calculate into everything else. I have to say, you just don't have that here. Like, you will go to some like touristy places and they detect our American accent. They will show us the tipping screen, but it is not a big deal to go, no, I'm not doing the tipping screen.
Right. Like you don't worry that that's some like egregious like violation of the social code here.
Yeah. It's not it. You know, you don't have to hide in shame if you're not tipping here. But we're really quickly the IRS, Internal Revenue Service in the U.S. and the HMRC in the U.K. both have recently released their tax brackets. I want to quickly cover these just because we all pay taxes. We talk about tax brackets, but I think a lot of people don't even know, like, what do you pay in income tax in the U.S.? What do you pay in income tax in the U.K.? Basically, to break it down, here's the IRS tax brackets.
So that's going to be the IRS tax bracket is specifically federal tax. So to make it more confusing,
let's not make it more confusing. This is federal income tax.
Yeah, so I'm saying that some people will also pay state income taxes, but that's not what we're talking here. We're talking federal only.
This is the federal income tax. So it's 10% in the IRS if you make for money you make up to $12,000. 12% then from everything from $12,000 to $50,000. I'm rounding here a little bit. Then 22% of taxes on money from $50,000 to $103,000, 24% for $103,000 to about $200,000, 32% for $200,000 to $250,000, between $250,000 and $600,000, $625,000, you pay 35%, and then over $630,000 of income, you pay 37%. So the highest tax bracket is 37% for federal U.S. income tax.
Gonna be honest, I thought that would be higher.
What would be higher? The percentage or the amount?
I thought that the percentage for the highest tax bracket would be more than 37%.
And nobody actually pays 37%. I mean, there could be some insanely high earners that will pay effectively 37%, but really you're paying in those bands. I know this point has been hammered a lot, but a lot of people do believe that if you go up in salary, you can go into a higher tax bracket and make less money. That's not the way that works. Everyone is paying 10% on their first $12,000 that they're earning. Everyone is paying 22% on the money between $12,000 and $50,000.
When I was younger, I absolutely had that. I worried about getting a raise at work because I thought that then I would make less money because I'd go into a higher tax bracket. And I felt like such an idiot when I learned how it worked. I was like, oh, I mean, that's good.
I actually heard when I was younger of people wanting to turn down raises because they had done the math and they would figured out that they would be paying more in taxes. You only pay tax on the extra money. Also, it's different in the UK versus the US. In the US, you have your standard deduction, which is now $15,000 for the upcoming tax year. And in the UK, it's £12,500, which just from currency exchange, it's about the same amount of money. It's kind of the same. It's right there. It's a little different though because the way they do it. In the US, you take like if you made $50,000, you just drop your income down to $35,000 because you're deducting that $15,000. In the UK, you don't pay taxes on the first $12,500. It sounds like the same thing, but it's not because you're lowering your ceiling down out of those higher tax brackets. So in the UK, you don't have that lowering. You just don't pay on the first amount.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That is a subtle but distinct difference.
And just really quickly in the UK, personal allowance, you don't pay taxes. Nobody pays taxes up until the first £12,500. Rounding here a little bit once again. Then between £12,500 to £50,000, it's 20% in that bracket. I had a little noise there. And then you move into the higher rate. It's called between £50,000 and £125,000. That's 40% in there. Then once you get over £125,000, it's 45%. So the highest tax bracket in the U.S. is at $600,000. Doing a quick little currency exchange here. In the UK, the highest tax bracket is about $150,000, and it's 45% in the UK versus 37% in the US.
Those are also much, much wider bands.
That has been your not financial advice tax summary for 2025.
But I have to say, if you're looking for ways to bolster your income, I have a great new red hot tip, and that is the Redbox. Do you remember Burnie and Redbox filed for bankruptcy?
Yeah.
Earlier this year, I think. And it turns out they just abandoned all those red boxes. There's something like 24,000 red boxes just hanging out in the U.S.
Right.
And they've just been abandoned. So there's thousands of things that like Walgreens and like Walmarts or outside, I don't know, a Taco Bell, whatever. The company is just poof, they're gone. They just
McDonald's had a lot of red boxes too, didn't they?
Didn't they?
McDonald's.
And so they're just the company's gone. There's no one left to come get these boxes. So all the like the Walgreens, whatever, they're stuck with them. And these machines, Bernie, they have hundreds of DVDs in them. They can hold up to like 600. So I'm going to say they've got like, let's say they're 80% capacity. They got 500 DVDs. You're looking at a solid flea market career if you just like go around like picking up red boxes.
Well, here's the problem is that all the DVDs are of that window of time, right? They're in that release for whenever they declared bankruptcy, maybe like 2 months before. So if you want like 80 copies of like Transporter 2 or whatever, then you're going to get that. Start
putting together like playing decks. You're like, oh, he's got a transporter of clubs and it's the full suite.
But what are they going to do? Yeah, so there's no one left to then remove the boxes.
Right. So Walgreens was saying they've got something like 5,000 of these boxes, right? And it's costing them hundreds of $1,000s a month in power just because these things are hardwired into the buildings.
Wow.
They would have to get electricians to come out to disconnect these things. And then these machines are also like 1,000 pounds and someone's going to have to haul them away. What are they going to do with them? What good are these machines to anyone? So there's this guy in Alabama who's gone and he's taken a couple machines and he's now got a garage full of like 20,000 DVDs. So I'm just saying, Mom, if you're listening to this, I have a way for you to dramatically increase your collection.
Do you want 800 copies of the latest Jason Statham movie? Gerard Butler, you go crazy. You got it. That's insane. It reminds me when you're talking about this, we had talked about this recently with something else where company went out of business and what happens to X? What was it?
I think we were specifically talking about 23andMe.
Right.
Potentially being sold off and then what happens to your genetic data if that happens.
And it's, we were saying at the time, like, can the federal government do anything? Like this would be a place where the federal government could step in and say, like, what happens when these companies have these crazy assets that could potentially be damaging? What can be done about that? Can they regulate what happens? And in this case, what do you do about the red boxes? Or there's, in my opinion, a completely different like strata of this is in Texas. There's a lot of oil companies that they did the math. They figured out they could lease some land, put up an oil well, get the oil out of the ground until it wasn't economically viable anymore. And then they just shut down the shell company, or the company that was running it went bankrupt. Now we have all these what they call zombie oil wells, which are just out there, holes in the ground.
Just open holes?
They're just spewing natural gas, methane. They're a huge like cumulative environmental problem, but there's no one who has any accountability for these things because they're just sitting there.
But they leased land, right?
That's a really good point. So they did lease. There has to be someone who owns the land. So at some point, you could hold the landowner accountable. They did lease their land for this oil well to go up, or a company bought it. Somebody owns the land. There's not any orphan land out there. Not in Texas.
I feel like this has been solved. There are like apartment renters and landlords have had this issue licked for a really long time. When you rent an apartment, right, you put down a deposit, and then if you like damage the carpet or throw paint on the walls or whatever, that comes out of your deposit when you move out, so the landlord can make repairs before the next guy moves in. I feel like, how is it that hard to get a deposit, for, I don't know, capping these wells or something before the company moves in and starts drilling on your land?
Does the landlord really make repairs with that money, or do they pocket the money and then like throw a coat of paint over the top of the hole in the wall or something like that?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? It is, there should be a mechanism in place for what happens when this ends. Like with Redbox here, it's like all these boxes. How much did you say they were spending in power?
Well, this was just Walgreens said they were spending like $180,000 a month in power, and there's something like 20% of the Red boxes. So we're talking like $1 million a month across all these Redbox machines, just sitting there, just zombie power, right?
Yeah, or they're just taking up space, and I guess no, they can't, because I was thinking. They could even just say like, hey, guys, Redbox, everyone go and rent a DVD for a day, but then keep it. Who's going to come after you for doing that? But I guess you probably can't even transact with the machine, can you?
I mean, imagine that the servers that they would theoretically connect to, that's all gone. So there's nowhere for them to connect to authorize a rental. So there's just the machine and the DVDs abandoned, left alone.
Weird.
Here's what we do. We throw them down, all of these zombie oil wells.
Plug them up, and then you're all done. Thanks, Jason Statham. You solved our problem for us.
Easy peasy.
Poor Jason Statham. I don't know why I maligned him by associating him with this problem. He probably doesn't even have a movie out this year, for God's sake.
Maybe he can transport them.
We just plug it up with like the Meg 8. Giant sharks plugging the zombie oil wells. Yeah, but it's a big problem, and there should be some kind of mechanism for what happens. Like, what happens when these scooter companies go out of business, and then all of a sudden these sidewalks are covered with all these scooters?
Well, you just you take them all, you throw them in the water, and you say, "Hey, look, we've just created a new natural reef. Sure, it's leaking battery fluid, but natural reef is important, right?"
Hey, while we're talking about big ugly boxes taking up parking spots in the parking lot, can I talk about the Cybertruck for a second?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear where this
You're not
is going.
You're not gonna believe this. You're not gonna believe this.
You did not buy a Cybertruck.
So no, I did not buy a Cybertruck. I did see a lot of them in Austin when I was there, though. There were a lot of them.
Do they look as ridiculous as they do in pictures?
I was never one of the people who thought it looked stupid, like the prototype. I thought, that's interesting, and I like things that are interesting and new. And I know a lot of people had like a hardcore rejection of that design. That being said, one Cybertruck is interesting. 20 Cybertrucks, it's kind of gross.
Novelty wears off quick.
Yeah, the novelty wore off really quickly after I saw about the fifth or sixth one. And they were just all felt like kind of dirty. Like if you've ever had like a stainless steel thing.
Oh, like when you get the fridge that gets all fingerprinty.
Exactly. Like some of the door wells where people would grab the door, those were all like grimy, and it just felt, ugh. Anyway, but that being said, Tesla, it was rumored that Tesla was going to have a really bad earnings report, and that was why they moved the robotaxi event to just before their earnings report. Not the case at all. They had a great earnings report. They beat the Wall Street estimates, and the Tesla stock has rebounded as a result. And Ashley, you might not believe this. Did you know that of the top 3 selling EVs in America in Q3 2024 was the Model Y, Tesla,
okay,
the Model 3, Tesla,
okay,
and coming in at number 3, best-selling EV, the Cybertruck.
Oh my God. Really? Seriously?
It sold 2.3 times more than the Ford F-150 Lightning. It's
wow.
For
oh my
God.
God.
An EV, it's doing very well.
I feel like every time I see a picture of these things posted online, it's always like I saw a unicorn, like there's some crazy rare thing, but you're saying that's not the case at all.
Third best selling in Q3. I mean, I don't know what that means, but it is outselling the other EVs.
That's mental to me.
Honestly, if you would have asked me like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have thought the Ford F-150 Lightning would have been one of the best-selling vehicles of all time. I really thought that.
I
really
feel like
did.
it's definitely got a place, but I feel like a lot of the people that are going to buy a Ford F-150 don't want the electric.
I agree with you. And like a lot of things...
Even though I bet those things are absolute beasts for towing.
In the country today, like a lot of things, I think it's just become weirdly, unnecessarily political. I really do. I think it's become weird. I think that's a factor in why EVs have not broken into it, which makes it interesting when you look at what Elon Musk is doing with his whatever he's doing politically. I don't fully understand like him writing giant checks to voters. I have to admit, I don't understand how that's allowed. But it is interesting how he seems to be embracing the part of the political spectrum which has not yet embraced EVs. Time will tell if his strategy of alienating his existing audience and trying to find the new market will ultimately work for Tesla.
Maybe it is a big gamble. Maybe he's trying to get the right into EVs and just hoping that the left will keep with EVs for EV's sake.
Yeah. And just as to bring this back around to the discussion we had at the top of the podcast, Elon Musk makes more than $620,000 a year. So he's in the 0% tax bracket. Not sure how that math works either, but somehow that's the way it works out. But yeah, can we do a quick little roundup on entertainment stuff since we're at the 20-minute mark?
Yeah,
here?
let's do it. Let's do a couple quick things. One, you have until March 2025 to experience Minecraft in VR, after which Mojang has announced that they are dropping VR support for Minecraft. In other news, there's VR support for Minecraft. I somehow missed this. I knew that it was intended. I remember that HoloLens demo they did years and years ago where they had it projected on a table and looked like this amazing way to interact with the world. And then HoloLens just didn't really develop quite in that direction. And then I guess I didn't follow what happened with Minecraft VR after that, but it has it until March.
Right. And I think that I can't help but think that HoloLens going away is what's driving this VR support from leaving, even though, like you said, this is one of those categories of things that they announced it's leaving and I didn't know it existed before.
Right.
Know?
Or maybe they're getting ready for some next stage. We'll see. I have no idea.
So apparently people in the military can play Minecraft VR and we can't. Thanks, U.S. military, for nothing.
Go ahead and drop a bunch of virtual blocks and some zombie wells for us, would you? Also going away, this is very interesting, is
things that are going away that you didn't know existed.
Is Netflix is shuttering its in-house game studio. This is one that they announced about, I want to say 2 years ago, when they got some really big names on it. So they got Joe Staten from Halo. They got Chaco Sonny, who was a former Overwatch executive producer, and they got a Sony Santa Monica art director, Rafael Grassetti, and they all came on as big names to start this studio, and now the studio is being shuttered. I don't think they've ever even announced what project they were working on, and that's about it.
Yeah, it seems like just yesterday that we were talking about Joe Staten going off and joining the Netflix studio, and now they're being shut down. It's crazy. They not announcing anything that they were going to make. I was really curious about it. I thought they, if anyone could break through and establish a new brand in gaming, it could have been Netflix, and especially because they hired such great names.
They did. If I may make a couple of totally baseless speculations, one would be that Netflix may have underestimated game development and how that sort of works. And it may not jive with Netflix's timelines. As we've noted, they put out a lot of projects. And production on a movie is very different than production on a game. Games are minimums of years in development, and movies you can turn around pretty quickly. So that sort of pace may not have worked well with what Netflix is hoping to do overall with their audience. Or they've just decided that maybe gaming isn't where they want the people interacting with their stuff. And
I'll be curious where all these people land, especially because I'm a huge fan of Joe Staten. I'll be curious to see where Joe goes next.
And the final big thing in entertainment, I thought this was interesting anyway, is that the Dune 2 score has been deemed ineligible for Oscar consideration. This is Hans Zimmer's Dune Part 2 score because it doesn't meet requirements. This is what was really interesting about this. Apparently, the Dune 2 score uses more than 20% has more than a 20% musical crossover with the score of Dune 1. So it is not eligible for consideration on its own because there's too much music from the first movie in the second movie.
Right.
But I find that really interesting because John Williams has been nominated for 6 Star Wars movies, a couple of Harry Potter movies, 4 Indiana Jones movies, and I'm flabbergasted as a non-musician myself that those movies didn't have more than 20% crossover in their scores.
I'm also curious what counts as the soundtrack. For instance, if they had the Imperial March from Empire Strikes Back or something like that, and they included it in the next movie, but it's not on the official soundtrack they sell, does that count towards your 20%?
Right. Or it's if you riff on that march enough, what counts as different? If it's the same progression and the same notes and everything, what would make that different enough to not be considered part of the 20%?
It sounds like that Hans Zimmer had the same problem you had as a dessert girl. He went over the 20%. And it did count all the way retroactively to his first song. He was
It
disqualified.
turns out he got a raise and he lost money.
He lost it all. All right, Ashley, who do we have to thank for this podcast?
I would like to thank I'm the Fridge, Tom Gajay, and Kino Sevilla. Thank you all for sponsoring this episode of our show at patreon.com/morning somewhere.
Yes, you 37% tax bracket earners. We appreciate all of your help. We really do appreciate it. All
Don't worry,
well,
it's a write-off.
that does it for us today, October 24th, 2024. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you'll be here as well.
Bye, everybody.